We have inherited this planet from our forefathers, and we owe it to our children. What a beautiful legacy they are going to bequeath in the form of plundered, scorched, and virtually exhausted planet. As Gandhiji used to preach, there is enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. Good afternoon, everyone. Today's webinar focuses on certain issues related to aqua. In the words of S.T. Coleridge, water, water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. Water, water everywhere, and all the boats did shrink. These words now appear to be a harsh reality. It's a pointless contradiction that the blue planet is turning blue for lack of sufficient potable water. Kashipur is located in the Tarai region. The word Tarai actually means wetland or swamps. Unfortunately, due to overuse of groundwater for industrial, agricultural, and domestic purpose, a hydrological disconnect has occurred and the bleak scenario poses an imminent threat to the flora and fauna of our region. This region is endowed with sylvan surroundings, salubrious climate, and above all, subtle ecosystem. The focus is now on a resilient Kashipur 2030, who makes the city. We have adopted the Drona Sagar Lake and its revival in the days to come. Someone has aptly remarked that every journey begins with a small step. Kashipur is an ancient town, and according to mythology, this town is believed to have existed since the great epic Ramayana. Girital and Dronasagar are well-known lakes and are associated with the history of Pandavas. King Devi Chand ruled this region according to the Indian history. Today's program has been divided into three parts, dealing with history, the present scenario, and the future action plan. If we talk about the demographics, massive deforestation in the Bhabar zone has caused more runoff, resulting in declining recharge. Rapid increase in the number of tube wells in the region has resulted in increase in the areas under farming. Increase in population during last 20 to 30 years has caused more groundwater consumption. Moreover, general decline is also seen in the annual rainfall in the Tarai region. According to reliable sources obtained from the Meteorological Department of Kashipur, there is a cyclic occurrence of droughts in our region over a span of 11 years, with 2 mild droughts, 4 severe and 2 most severe ones. Today, we all are here to attend a webinar on the auspicious occasion of Gandhi Jayanti. Ever since 2015, we have been organizing a conclave on the occasion of October 2nd. This year, the focus is on what was initiated last year in a symposium that discussed clear water revival. Our social service group named Setu is creating a roadmap through collaborated efforts to create a resilient Kashipur. Now, coming to the main topic, what we are experiencing at the moment is known as a hydrological disconnect. What exactly is hydrological disconnect? Well, if the groundwater table below insufficiently changes, the groundwater table effectively does not alter the infiltration rate that is referred to as a disconnected system. It also controls the flow of a lake or a river as it gets recharged by groundwater. Now the point is, what is a wetland? Wetlands could be marsh peatland, whether natural or artificial, permanent or temporary, with water that is static or flowing. It is estimated that wetlands and other forms of water cover about 6% of the Earth's surface and provide habitats for as much as 20% of the planet's various life forms. This quality of wetland is often referred to as a biological supermarket. Now, this slide shows the function of wetland. These are among the most productive ecosystems in the world. They support wide variety of plants, insects, amphibians, reptiles, birds, fish, and mammals. Wetlands play an important role in the quality of watershed. They form the basis of food web and support many species of fish, amphibians, shellfish, and insects. Wetlands are also producers of highest biomass compared to any other ecosystem worldwide. Now this slide pertains to threats to wetland. These are caused by draining and infilling for housing and other developmental projects. Loss of biodiversity by conversion of open public parks and recreational lakes. Last but not the least, invasive species resulting in the loss of native species. These can be classified into some other submerged water plant, floating water plants, emergent water plants, and riparian water plants. Submerged water plants are 100% underwater and provide food source for native flora and fauna and habitat for invertebrates. Type of wetlands in Uttarakhand. As per National Wetland Atlas 2011, there are 994 wetlands of various categories, of which including 816 are small wetlands of less than 2.25 hectare area. The total area under the wetlands in the state is 1,03,882 hectare, which is 1.92% of its total geographical area. Now we shall talk about wetlands as carbon sink. Carbon sinks are natural systems that suck up and store carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Wetlands are globally important carbon sinks, storing vast amounts of carbon and thereby helping to mitigate climate change. The main natural carbon sinks are plants, the oceans, and soil. Plants grab carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to use in photosynthesis. Some of this carbon is transferred to soil as plants die and decompose. Combined, the Earth's land and ocean sinks absorb about half of all carbon dioxide emissions from human activities. Now, according to the Wetland Atlas of 2017, the new rule related to decentralization of wetlands management provide power to the states to identify and notify wetlands within their authorities and also to keep close vigil on activities in areas where wetlands have been adversely affected. There has been an unprecedented decline in the waters of Nainital Lake since 2017. Now, what is the solution to this problem? It is very obvious that catchment revival of 70% wetlands is urgently required. Wetland birds also require protection like other endangered species of our region, mainly tigers and other endangered species.
There are various ways in which wetlands can be restored or brought back to life. First is restoration, the manipulation of physical characteristics of a site with the goal of returning natural functions to former wetlands. Second is re-establishment, the manipulation of the physical characteristics of a site with the goal of returning natural functions to a former wetland. Re-establishment results in rebuilding a former wetland and results in gain in the wetland acres. Rehabilitation, the manipulation of the physical characteristics of a site with the goal of repairing natural functions of degraded wetlands. Rehabilitation results in gain in wetland functions but does not result in a gain in wetland acres. Establishment, the manipulation of the physical characteristics present to develop a wetland that did not previously exist on an upland or deep water site. Establishment results in a gain in wetland acres. Enhancement, the manipulation of the physical characteristics of a wetland site to heighten, intensify, or improve specific functions for a purpose such as water quality improvement, floodwater retention, or wildlife habitat. Enhancement results in a change in wetland functions and can lead to a decline in other wetland functions, but does not result in a gain in wetland acres. This term includes activities commonly associated with the term enhancement, management, manipulation, and directed alteration. Protection and maintenance, the removal of a threat or preventing decline of wetland conditions by an action in or near a wetland. Includes purchase of a land or easement, repairing water control structure or fences, or structural protection such as repairing a barrier island. This term also includes activities commonly associated with the term preservation. Protection and maintenance does not result in a gain in any wetland acres. The whole district of Lakhimpur was at once surrounded by ponds and wetlands. Due to urbanization, all these ponds are being filled. We should have learned from the unplanned urban growth that by disturbing the ecology of the area, we are depriving the people the availability of water. There is ample scope for growth of this city even after conserving our ecology. Due to the fact that it is located remotely on Nepal border, far away from Lucknow, there is none to take care of these issues. Over there, the farmers have already started a campaign against the acquisition of this land. The state government of UP has acquired this land due to its wetland character and no suitability for cultivation. Farmers are claiming it as a fertile land and opposing its acquisition. Under the multi-crore project, the state government has planned to lift water from Ganga River near Hatida in Patna district and supply it to Gaya, Rajgir and Nawara towns through pipelines. The Ganga water will be thoroughly processed for drinking purpose within the supply chain system before going to the consumer's tap. We are focusing on the revival of one of the 12 lakes that once existed in this historical city. Drona Sagar Lake, in its present scenario, appears like a dying pond due to the utter neglect by the stakeholders. The feeder canal emerging from the aquifer located about 10 kilometers away has now been covered to accommodate more vehicles due to the emergence of residential localities as well as industrial units. The aforesaid feeder canal has now become virtually extinct and its revival is urgent. Civic bodies and administration of Kashipur are making efforts in this direction. We, as one of the stakeholders, wish to play our part in the proposed action plan for a resilient Kashipur 2030. Every dark cloud has a silver lining, and let's hope that this legendary lake would regain its former glory and become Kashipur's landmark in the days to be. And for this, we need to address a few problems. One problem is the ad hoc development. It was never the intention of anyone or anybody to create this issue, but areas around water bodies have already been encroached by the land sharks. Maybe the thoughtful plan was causing the disconnect of floodwater. Development around water bodies led to elevated roads, creating ponds, further locking the space and disconnecting the surroundings. Monsoon is an annual event, while flooding too should be considered as a natural event, and every city has certain areas that act like sponges. These sponges should be allowed absorption and connection of floodwater to a large scale. In Kashipur, important commercial centers like Maharana Pratap Chowk and Railway Road areas were once catchment areas to absorb road runoff. Due to hasty and unplanned commercialization, the areas now turned into swimming pools on NH74 during monsoon. Percolation is virtually non-existent and water table is receding. The stakeholders are the local residents, civic bodies, local administration, NGOs, clubs, and above all, educational institutions. This year, we are carrying the idea of clear water revival, the concept of revival for survival, not only for human beings, flora and fauna, but also for our planet. Remember, we only have one earth, so let's join hands to revive it. Before handing over the mic to architect Mr. Vasudevan Kadlail, I would like to say that we are very fortunate to have such eminent personalities among us. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation. With this, we come to the end of our today's presentation. I hope it was to your expectations. Now I request Mr. Vasudevan Kadlail to take over. Sir, we would like you to introduce the panelists to the audience. So over to you, sir. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a lovely rainy afternoon here in Bangalore. And thanks to technology, people from all over India are able to sort of be witness to this lovely video that was made by little scholars. I must really say, I don't think I knew any of the terms that the students mentioned when I was a school-going kid. So I think it really, we must really applaud the efforts of Little Scholar School, the teachers, the trustees headed by Pankaj, and the students. And I think they've done a fantastic job. I have been involved with them for the last couple of years, and it's really beautiful to see school children actually becoming more and more aware of their own environment, something that a lot of us still are not, even as grown-ups. So a big applause, a big round of applause to everybody at Little Scholar School. I think Pankaj has also managed to sort of spearhead this organization called SETU, which is social enterprise towards unified understanding and undertaking. So I think one of the key things about SETU is that it's something that's originated from a school. So that's something that's unique. Normally, activist organizations rarely take root in a school. And not just that, he's managed to create a coalition of schools who have been meeting during Gandhi Jayanti every year for the last 4 or 5 years. And that itself is a fantastic effort and a fantastic achievement to be able to consistently get people on board on things that are not normally a part of our regular lives. So that's a little introduction about Setu. Today, I'm really honored, and it's a great pleasure to introduce two great people that I have only had the fortune of reading about them and seeing some of the videos. But today, all of you are going to have a chance to kind of interact with both of them. So the first person I want to introduce is Mr. Manoj Mishra. Mr. Manoj Mishra is an environmentalist, an activist, and a person who's sort of gone beyond his profession and sort of looked at the environment and how one can contribute towards making it better. Mr. Manoj Mishra's latest passion for the last few decades has been to chart out the course of Yamuna and the various problems associated with Yamuna's 1400 kilometer long journey from a little beyond Yamunotri to where it meets Ganga in Allahabad. I've watched a couple of videos and it's been fascinating, and it's been an amazing learning experience for me to understand so many aspects about the river and Yamuna in particular. Mr. Manoj has also been a thorn in the side of successive governments, trying to get them to behave environmentally. I think one of the most important things that he has been advocating has been to save the floodplains of Yamuna in Delhi itself from rampant encroachment. This is something that continues to happen in many cities where we don't really take care of or look at our natural environment in as much detail as one needs to. So that's Mr. Manoj Mishra. Welcome to this panel discussion. I would like to now take the opportunity of introducing Mr. K.T. Ravindran. As a fellow architect, I have always admired Mr. K.T.'s works. And he is an architect and an urban designer. Currently the chairman of the Architectural Heritage Advisory Committee of INTAC. He's also a trustee of the Indian Heritage Cities Network Foundation, and was a member of the advisory board of the United Nations Capital Master Plan of New York. He also served as a dean and senior academic advisor at the RICS School of Built Environment. He's been a member of the international jury of the AP Capital Complex, and subsequently a member of the expert committee for balanced regional growth of AP state. He was formerly the vice chairman of the Environmental Impact Assessment Committee with the central government, and also the chairman of the Delhi Urban Arts Commission. There is a long list of things that he's been a part of, but I think what really struck me when I spoke to him earlier in the day was, despite his experience and his immense achievements, he remains a down-to-earth man. Spent the time that he did with me over the phone, talks about his humility, and I would like to take this opportunity to welcome him to the panel discussion. So, Mishra ji and Katie sir, if you could switch on your audio and video, we could kind of take this panel discussion further. This is a question that I have for both Katie sir and Mishra ji. Most of the times, I mean, I think I would like to open it up because most of the times we know of the work, you know, but we rarely know of the work, the person behind the work. So, Mishra ji, if I can ask you, what were the major influences in your life that turned you into this line of thinking or this line of activism? You know, that I would love to. I'm sure students here also would love to hear, you know, what really were your childhood influences, and what kind of turned you into this line of activism.
You wish me to speak, or?
Yes, yes, sir. You can. You can. Mr. Ji, Katie sir has joined us, so we are good to go.
See, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me here. It's really great to speak to school children and other professionals. And I'm really very happy to at least see Professor Katie Indran, whom I hold in very high regard.
Old friends, yeah.
Now, coming to your specific question, what prompted me to actually, from a bureaucrat to a NGO wala to an activist. How this transition happened, and what motivated me into this. This is a question that has been put to us, because you see, I prefer to use the term us and not me, because it is never an individual who really does or can do anything. It's always a team. It's always a lot of people who are with you directly or even indirectly. So I always prefer to speak as us, because there could be a face or two, but a campaign or an activism is not a loner affair. So how this, as I mentioned, this question has been put to us several times now. That how did you, how you came into this? And frankly, I have no answer. Because, and the best that we have tried to really find some kind of a answer that may satisfy a person who asks it. Possibly it was the river itself. Possibly it was some larger force. because we can't really pinpoint a person or an event or whatever. Or see, the best that we can do is just when we started getting into trying to understand the river Yamuna and all related things, just prior to that, there was a huge lull because we had just finished a huge project as an NGO, which had taken us to all parts of the country. And it was really intense. There was a team of almost about 30, 40 people working in different parts. And so managing such a huge, diverse professional group over almost 3-4 years was really very hugely draining. And I guess that draining out created a vacuum. And I guess that vacuum got filled through a direction from the river. Okay, river is trying to flow just next to you, but it is unable to. Can you do something about it? And that's how it started. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Beautiful. That's beautiful, because I think life sometimes is never planned, and life happens to you. So I'm sure I sort of resonate with that idea, because I think it's just sometimes things that are greater than you, forces that are greater than you, sort of kind of take you in its own flow, and then you probably fulfill a sense of destiny. I'm not sure, but Katie sir, so the question was actually for both of you. So one of the things is, since some of our audience are also students, the question that I had asked was, what kind of took you into the line of architecture and then further on to urban design and hardcore activism in that sense, So what was that in your case? How did you kind of flow into this area?
Well, opting for architecture was really something that just happened to me. And of course, it's been like a roller coaster ride all these years, 55 years. And I must say that I have no regrets at all. I think architecture flows in my veins, and I love it. And I love the way it has opened the world to me. So architecture was something that was really fundamental to the way I began to see the world. Now, besides that, one can say that life experience is what has turned one into an activist. The fact that there is a deep-rooted idealism which was instilled in me as a child from my family, which actually found itself at odds with the world every now and then. And in my early career, I used to shift my location and my work every 3 years. I'll just pack up, take my bag, and leave for another city, start life new. I did that 3-4 times. I worked in different cities. I worked in Chennai, I worked in Delhi, I worked in Tehran, I worked in Calcutta, I worked in Hyderabad, and the last 30 odd years I've been in Delhi again. So, so one of the things that's actually shaped my thinking is the life experience that I've learned from, and the fact that one sees all forms of injustice, whether it's human rights violations or it is a question of environmental violation, which is as bad as human rights violation. That is, whether it's violation against people or violation against nature. All those things have really been impacting the way I look at the world. And I decided that with whatever instruments I have in my hands, primarily my profession, that I should be going hammer and claw against this injustice. So in that whole journey, I can quote 2, 3 specific instances which helped me widen my worldview. First thing is the fact that I did not work in any office. At the age of 21, when I graduated, I just opened an office and I started building. So that was actually helping me to learn on the job. After a few years, I went into a post-graduation, after which I worked in Tehran for 3 years. Then the most critical thing that happened to me was that after Tehran, I traveled, I backpacked through parts of Europe and Africa for a whole year. You know? So traveling alone for a whole year in places which you don't know, where you don't know the language, you don't know any people, you have no booking, you have just minimal money, and you're carrying your own load on your back. For an entire year, doing that alone is actually helped me shed all my defenses completely. Yeah. So all these kind of constructs that one has about who one is and how should I project myself, all that just collapsed, because every day you are confronting a new person in a new place whose language you don't speak. So you have to communicate, you have to manage. And when this happens to you constantly for a whole year, I think it kind of cleansed me completely. And it helped me come to my quintessential self, where I lost not self-pride, but I lost false pride. I lost hierarchies. I lost prejudices to color, religions, people, food habits, what have you. So it was a real cleansing process. Now, after doing this, I was actually wanting to do something socially purposive. So when I came back into India after 4 years, I went and worked in an NGO in Calcutta, a very democratically run NGO. And that NGO helped me see some very fundamental things about how do you organize your own workplace without any hierarchy. Because there was a lot of interpersonal communications, there were a lot of discussions, and it helped me lose my sense of hierarchy at workplace. Okay? I began to see the person who makes the tea or ones who come to clean the toilet and the guy who carries a leather bag and a khadi kurta as same, which was the NGO world. You know? And that I think was very structural in the way I subsequently worked when I became a teacher. I taught for 30 years in SPA, and during that period, apart from being a teacher, it taught me how to be personal and compassionate with my students. So even now, people whom I taught 35 years ago call me when they have a personal problem. Yeah, and I call them and I talk to them as friends. Yeah? So there's a whole transformation which took place through that process. And being in SPA also gave me the opportunity to be involved with many governmental bodies and hold positions of what is called power, which has nothing to do with power. Power is a complete fabrication, falsity of the ego. And so places where what you say and what you do can be consequential. That means the responsibility you have towards people and environment actually doubles, triples in such a condition. So going through all that kind of life, then subsequently I headed another institution which taught construction management and real estate finance and so on. So it threw me into an environment which is completely so different at every stage in life. And it is that life experience which actually is continuing to be the fire in my belly. And I still speak very, very passionately about people and environment. I think I'll stop there.
So that's wonderful. I mean, I think what I see as a common trait between the two of you is the importance of people in your life. Mishra ji mentioned the importance of a team, and you kind of alluded to that of having empathy. And I think probably the defining characteristic of going beyond your own professional limited professional circle and to be able to take on an activist position is also this feeling of empathy, and empathy for environment, empathy for people around you, and a certain idealism, like you mentioned, that remains as a fire in your belly, all the time. Again, a question to both of you, and maybe Mishra ji, you could take it first. If you could both tell us what is that one standout sort of project or a standout process that you have gone through, which really kind of informed you, it kind of challenged you, and what were the kind of learnings that you took from there? I know it's. I don't intend to put you on a spot in this case, but it's just that when you explain it through the lens of a particular exercise that you've taken, we just kind of learn that much more, So, Mishra ji, if you can go ahead first, and then I'll come to Katie sir on the same question.
Okay, there are a number of them, but I would, rather than wear my critical activist hat, I would wear a constructive activist hat here. You see, we wrote a project for to do with trying to define a river health index, because we did background research while we were trying to understand the river system, and we found that there were hardly any indices that could effectively actually tell us what is the current state of health of a river. Normally, we do few tests like dissolved oxygen, BOD, coliform level, which is to do only with water in the river. And there's one thing that we have never stopped saying, that water is not river. A river system is much, much bigger than water flowing in it. And now we have come to a stage where we say that it is not even water which is flowing in it. It needs a different name. Water is the medium, but what is flowing is much more than water. And we have suggested a name. A lot of people have critiqued that name. I'm not talking about that here now. So we wrote a project, and we got funded for that project to come out with a possible river health index. And we had actually projected to use river Yamuna as an example to develop this index. Now, a 1400 kilometer long river, to work on it and with a small team was certainly not possible. So we thought within the team, what would be the best way to go forward? And then we came to this, that, you see, let's involve the people who are the frontline stakeholders in making us understand what are the key elements of a river system that needs to be assessed while such an index is actually devised. And then we said, okay, 1400 kilometer long river, it is changing in different ways as it flows down the Himalayas to Prayag. So how to capture this diversity, this complexity, this difference? And then we read somewhere that a river, a large river, actually becomes a different river after every 100 kilometers. So that's, it's just a, you can say, thumb rule. And so we said, can we identify 14 locations on this 1400 kilometer long river and go to those 14 locations and try to involve, address, understand, and work with the local people there to make us understand what is really required for a healthy river. And that's what we did. So we what we now call as grids. So there are 14 grids along this 1400 kilometer river that we worked on. We worked with these people, these villagers who are on the river bank. In some places it is one village, in some places it is 2-3 villages, so it's like that. So, and I tell you, the kind of understanding, the kind of learning that we received from those people whom we often feel are illiterate, people who needs to be taught. Actually, they are the best teachers. They taught us what a river is, what a river requires, when is a river sick, when is a river healthy, and how we can go about turning a sick river into a healthy river. And this was, I can't say in our life we had a better eye-opener. So this experience, which is still ongoing, although the project is over, that project, initial project where we did come out with what we now call as People's River Health Index. So it is not a river health index. We started with RHI, but it ultimately ended up PRHI because it was their index. It was not our index. So, but once this PRHI was completed, and as we were finishing the work, another assignment came up to us on its own. You see, the beauty of our work, working with rivers, was that it was very, very rarely that we had to go out and seek a project. Whatever work was to be done came to us on its own. And this follow-up assignment that came, it went on for another 4 or 5 years, and that is still going on. And so this is one learning, this is one eye-opener that I think was our finest. There were many others, but this was our finest. Thank you.
That's a lovely example. I mean, I think as professionals, we sometimes get blindsided by our own expertise, quote unquote. I remember long time back, as architects, we love to complicate our own buildings, especially the younger you are, the more complicated we are. So I remember there was this crazy masonry that we were trying out with 3 different types of bricks, and we couldn't draw it out. We wanted our design intent to lay the bricks in a certain way, but we just couldn't do it. And finally, we gave it up. But there was a mason, a very old mason, a Tamilian person called Mani, who was at it for about 2 days. And he finally called me on the landline in the office in those days and then told me, "Sir, Kadachache, I got it. You go to the site. Yeah, I'll tell you how we can do this." So he didn't give it up, and that kind of totally humbled me. That is the, so learning from other people is fantastic. Katie, sir, something that you could share with us.
Well, I must say that there is actually not one project about which I passionately feel about, or one project that I did, which I passionately feel about or feel for or have learned more from than the other. Because every one of them, every little thing that you act upon is a source of learning, and it has its own transformative power. All that we need to do is to actually uh, uh, be mindful enough to understand that transformation process that you have yourself undergone and how the project, different aspects of the project has triggered it. So whether it's designing a small mud building or designing an entire city or looking at the regional planning of an entire state, the learnings are many and at many different levels. And each one of them requires equal passion from you as a professional as any other. So there really is not a choice that one can make. But today being 2nd October and being Gandhiji's day, I can perhaps tell you a little bit about the project I did in Wardha, in a place where Gandhiji started the Khadi and village industries. Yeah. He, in fact, started working on the Khadi concept in Wardha after he moved from, in 1936, he moved from Sabarmati to Wardha. And when he said that the life of India is in its villages, and village should give us the direction towards new growth. And he began to experiment with various things in that site. Yeah. And I had the good fortune to be able to work on a project on a site in which Gandhi lived and worked from, where he started the Khadi movement. In fact, Khadi movement was invented by another person who actually brought out the concept, and Gandhi actualized that concept, but living in that site. So this is a very, very specific project for today, being October 2nd. And I remember the number of October 2nds which I've spent in Wardha, sitting in Bapukuti in silence. Yeah. So the transformative power of something like that is quite different. But as a project, what drove that project, being a project related to Gandhi, it was a competition which was held by the IIT of Delhi. So Delhi IIT got the project from the government to set up this Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Rural Industrialization. Yeah. And they called for a competition. And that also has a little bit of personal history to it, which maybe I should just talk about that as well. I had this very close friend called Mr. Vinu Kale, who was to my knowledge, the finest barefoot Gandhian architect that I've seen. He lived in Wardha and worked in Wardha. He worked with bamboo and mud, and he propagated mud. And he was very closely associated with the IIT Delhi, where he has built a number of experimental structures as well. He was a very close friend of mine, and very often whenever he came to Delhi, he stayed with me. We'd lie on the floor in the living room under the fan, and we'd chat till 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning about various issues. He was really a close friend from professional and kind of an ideation point of view. And suddenly Vinu passed away. And in those days, he used to tell me about this project, his dream project where, Khadi will be taken out of the wretched ditch in which it has fallen and will be revived and taken up in a more scientific way and become more acceptable to larger number of people. It was Vinu's dream to do that. And as luck would have it, the IIT Delhi advertised for that project. When they were given the project, they advertised to find an architect to do that project. I normally don't enter too many competitions, once in a way, very rarely. And in this case, I thought, in Venu's name, I must do this project. I not just enter the project, not just compete for it, but I must actually build this project. Because Vinu had talked about it to me so passionately, and he was such a dear friend of mine. Yeah. So, and as luck would have it, I was awarded the project, and it took me something like close to 4 to 5 years to build it. Yeah. And the three principles on which I hooked the whole scheme were three principles which I isolated from Gandhi. First is the idea of simplicity. Yeah? That complexity and simplicity are not mutually exclusive things. Yeah? What we call simple has a complex dimension, and what we call complex has a simple dimension as well. So if you approach the problem from the perspective of simplicity, you can hit upon the quintessential relationship between the human being and nature. So that's a fundamental principle. So simplicity was the first guiding factor. I can go on a lot about simplicity, and I'll refrain from it now for want of time. Then the second principle that I worked with was restraint in collective action.
Okay.
Even though Gandhi was a person who talked about self-transformation all the time, be the change that you want to be. You know, like all of us know, every child in the country knows that statement now. Be the change that you want to be. That means it is your personal transformation, which is the transformation of the change that you see in the outside environment. Yeah. That's what the power of our rishis are based on. That is when they sit in tapasya, out of self-restraint and control, they gain enormous power over their environment. Okay. So Muni can sit under the tree, look at a bird, and the bird will drop dead. He has that kind of power, not by being violent on the bird, but it's just the intensity of his emotion or intensity of his feeling that has the capacity to change things physically. In other words, the amount of control you have over your environment is directly proportionate to the amount of control you have over yourself. So self-restraint is the key to collective action. If you want a group to work together collectively, you have to embody the quintessential qualities of that group. And it is that will give you the capacity to bring about that fusion between people that will lead to collective action. Now, second principle I based was on restraint in collective action. And the third and a very important principle was a reverential relationship with nature. It's not just that of a compassionate environmentalist. It is the feeling of reverence towards a natural element, whether it's a river, it's a tree, it's just the earth, or it's what the planners call wasteland. There's nothing called wasteland. Every parcel of land is integral part of an environment. And there's nothing waste about it. You know? So that once you have a reverential relationship with nature and with land, you will not see anything as a waste, anything as excess, anything in nature as something that you can do without. Yeah? Everything, you learn to respect the nature, you learn to respect your environment. So this fundamental respect towards people and environment, along with compassion, is the lesson that I learned from that project. I unfortunately don't have the time to show you the project, but there I also got the opportunity to restore the kitchen from which Kasturba Gandhi cooked. It was called Kasturba Kitchen. I had the opportunity to restore the guest house of the Bajaj Industries Group, where Gandhi stayed for many years and developed the Khadi movement. And I also had the opportunity to restore, within the same project, a gate which was designed by Gandhi and was inaugurated by him. And the gate used to have goshalas on two sides, and they made milk products from them, and they gave it, they sold it to the community around Even now that milk products are still sold. By 4 o'clock in the evening, everything is sold out. Even today, after, I don't know, 1936, the building was inaugurated. So, so the opportunities that these projects gave me to learn about life and myself, and learn about projects and people and places and environment is just enormous. Many projects are like that. In fact, most projects are like that. But today it's of particular reference for me to make, because it's Gandhi Jayanti, that I would like to talk about. That's why I have chosen to speak about this project.
No, that's so beautiful. I think projects like these, and I think what you mentioned in the beginning, every small project, even every small part of a project, is a great learning experience. Every day is a learning experience. You learn from so many things, so many people all around you. Taking the focus of our discussion to the topic on hand, which is on cities, and I think there is never we can't stop talking about cities. I think in as much as Gandhi said the soul of India lives in the villages, but today with more than 40% of our country being urbanized and projections of further urbanization that will happen over the coming decades, I think cities need more focus. And both Mishra ji and you have been involved in different aspects of the cities. So question to Mishra, which again is common in its thread, but what would your advice be? Today our urban spaces are obviously lacking quality. Again, quality is a very ephemeral word, and each person will have a different definition. But if I could ask Mishra ji, what would your advice be for people like Setu, for example? If we were to take up Kashipur as the closest town to our area of action, and what would be the key points that we should be looking at if we are trying to take on the job of improving the quality of the town or the city, as it were, from approach perspective?
Okay. See, Kashipur, I have passed through Kashipur. I was in the Forest Service, so Corbett, and I also did my graduation from Pantnagar. So I know this area, and I come from Kotdwar. So I am very much aware of this landscape and the situation. But I have never stayed in Kashipur, or really, although my mother tells me that our Kul Devi is somewhere in Kashipur, Shakambari Devi. I don't know where it is. If I were to really try to suggest or come out with some kind of an action plan for a better quality of life in Kashipur for the people who are living there, I would become a kite first. I would become a kite. I would soar very high and look at Kashipur from that height. And then see, where is Kashipur located? And what I would find, that it is south of Corbett National Park, that it is east of Dhela River, east and west of Dhela River, that it is west of Kosi River, and it is north of the border between Uttarakhand and UP. Now, with this, a very broader understanding of where is Kashipur, I would then slowly come down. And then what I would find is that the Dhela River is actually almost cutting the city, and there is a new city which is developing on the right bank of Dhela River. And the old Kashipur town is on the left bank. I would also see that there are two national highways that are passing through the. And then I would be able to see first a small hillock, and then at the base of the hillock, this Drone Sagar Lake. So, and that is how I would really come down and then come to narrow lanes and other parts and other water bodies and things like that. And then I would try to understand what am I as a resident of Kashipur, and how as a resident of Kashipur am I interacting with my left, with my right, with my north, with my south, and what kind of impact is that my relationship with all the four directions actually making on my fellow beings. So my actions or my failure to take action, how is it really changing the scenario? And I would focus on, of course, the Drone Sagar Lake, as this school has actually taken up as a mission. I would look at two things: the Drone Sagar Lake and the Dhela River. Because Drone Sagar Lake and the state of Dhela River reflects Kashipur as a humanized environment, as a humanized space. Now, the kids have already shown that Drone Sagar Lake is in a very bad shape and it needs to be rejuvenated. But I'm not aware what is the state of Dhela River as it leaves Kashipur area. Because that is your report card. The report card of Kashipur city is the health of Dhela River as it leaves you. Just like the report card of Corbett National Park is the kind of Dhela River that it provides you from upstream. So also vis-a-vis Drone Sagar, I would look at that hillock, because Drone Sagar is a product of that hillock. And it is the health of that hillock that will determine the health of Drone Sagar. You may do all kinds of interventions, but until unless the hill is revegetated, I'm not saying just raise some trees here and there, revegetate it. And once you revegetate that hill, the Drone Sagar Lake will automatically rejuvenate. You don't really need to look for that lake, that canal that used to bring water. Yes, catchment is important. That canal is also important. But far more important is that revegetation of that hill, of that hillock. It's a small hillock, as I could make out from the Google image. And then, of course, are the other elements. See, where is Kashipur standing? It was a wonderful sal forest. That entire stretch was wonderful sal forest, just like you find now in Corbett National Park. It was just like that. But for various reasons, all that sal forest was converted into what we have, Kashipur city, and the farmland all around it. Now, I'm not suggesting that you bring back that sal forest. Even if you wish to, you cannot. But be respectful of this fact that you are sitting in a former forested area, which ensured that your water was always available. You are actually you are not as much in Sarai, you are more in Bhawa tract, just like my Kotdwar is. And that Bhawa tract is a wonderful, it seeps water. Bhawa, it doesn't. And it goes very deep. And then it feeds the aquifer. So for you, water should never be an issue. You have got two big rivers on your either side. You have got good rainfall and you have got Bhawa area to sleep in. So water should be available just about 10 feet under the ground in your area ideally. But I don't know whether it is today or not. And the last point which I wish to make, for making any city improving the quality of life is, please look at your natural drainage line. Your city is full of natural drainage lines, and respect them. They are tributaries of Dela and also Kosi. Revise those natural drainage lines and you will never ever suffer urban floods. You forget about your natural drainage lines and urban flood will visit you every year. Thank
you. That's wonderful. I mean, I think the points that you've made are fantastic, and it's now being thrown in our face with a lot more impact, because it's not unusual for Bombay, Chennai, Bangalore to flood, and not just that. Now, I mean, I live and work in Karnataka, and I know that Mangalore and Udupi, which are two towns that I'm very familiar with and I work in. I don't think anybody in living memory remembers Udupi flooding. You know, there is no big river that flows through there. There's just a small one, and this time the Udupi temple was flooded. So that's the craziness that we are facing, and I think respect for natural drainage is not there at all. I mean, it's non-existent. Katie sir, I wanted to ask you. It's a similar question to you, but a little more on the harder aspects of infrastructure and aesthetics. You have been somebody who's worked very actively. You always mentioned that cities organically develop, and there is a beauty in that chaos that is there in our cities. And that's, I definitely sort of resonate with that idea. What I wanted to ask you is, there is now in smaller towns, there is an focus on improving the hard infrastructure part of it. Well designed, not well designed, that's a different issue. But there is a focus now in terms of providing for better drainage, better sewerage, better roads and things like that. But I think there is very little thought on the aesthetic aspects, of placemaking. It's not there in big cities, but it is even less in smaller cities. What would you say are the institutional mechanisms, if there were, in your long years of experience, what do you think could work, to make, I'm not just talking about Kashipur, but it could be any small town, and there are thousands of them in this country. So what would you say would be an approach that we could take? And here, your answer could be directed at one, as architects and urban designers, professionals, but also towards citizens, towards bureaucrats. What do you think that, how do you think we could approach this problem at a systemic level?
Well, thank you for asking this question. Of course, the fundamental thing is the fact that nature is the basic primary layer, and habitation and human activity is the secondary layer. They're both completely interconnected. In fact, it is a continuum between the natural environment and our internal environment, what we call our culture. It's one and the same, two ends of the same phenomenon. If you impact one heavily, the other is impacted. If you ruin nature, you will find that society is in a disarray. If you ruin the society, you will find that in no time they'll ruin the natural environment.
Right.
They are like so intrinsically interconnected. They are a continuum. They are in fact the same things. So this part and the need for understanding that primary layer has been very beautifully brought out by Manoj. So I will not go into that dimension. I'd like to rather focus on people and the place.
Yes.
So basically, I think the first thing that we need to understand is that why is it that our environment, our urban environments have become so degenerate? Why is it that it's full of garbage and filth and broken footpaths and encroachments? And it is just absolute senseless, and incompassionate exploitation of the public areas. That's what we find in every city in our country. What has brought it to this pass? I think that's the fundamental thing for us to understand. Basically, I would argue that over a period of time, through the introduction of the kind of governance system that we have in our cities and towns, we have slowly, over a period of time, incrementally disconnected the people from their own environment. We have disconnected the people from taking any custodianship of their own physical environment. People, they say, okay, that's municipality's job, that's the government's job, it's a public space, it's someone else's job, it's not my job. So there is that sense of ownership which people should have about their own environment has been disjuncted by our governance system and the pathetic performance of our governance system. So, let's not go into improving the governance system as a recipe for this. That's another trajectory altogether. But I think the basic job that we need to do is to reconnect people with their own physical environment. It's after we do this reconnection, after we bring a compassionate relationship between people and their cities, that we find technical solutions. So the first thing that I would say is working towards rebuilding that custodianship, rebuilding the trust that people have in their own environment, and people proudly owning the city. That sense of ownership has to be built back. I think that's the fundamental step in ensuring that there is a healthy environment. Why do in India we clean our homes so well? We take out the garbage and we throw it on the road. Why do we do that? We clean our house so well, and we know the threshold is the sacred spot from where Lakshmi enters into my house, and therefore let me keep that place clean. Let me put some alpana in front of it and make it beautiful. Welcome Lakshmi into my house. And then they sweep out the garbage and they throw it on the road. They keep their home so well because there is a sense of ownership. There's a sense of custodianship. we have to rebuild that custodianship, extend that custodianship to their physical environment. For this, the first method is in planning parlance, we call it participatory planning. Yeah? Of course, participation comes only if you have a will to participate. If you have a desire, if you are passionate about improving the environment. So the first job I would do in any town is to see how to build this connect between communities and places. Now, of course, there's one of the things that we talk about in the Urban Design Studio is the distinction between a space and a place. When does a space become a place? It becomes a place when there is custodianship, there is ownership, there is affection, there is compassion invested in that space. When you invest compassion into a space, it becomes a place. It's owned by people, it's attached, it attaches itself to people. It builds up that relationship between people and the place. That is when it becomes a place. Yeah? So if you want to create urban places and not just sterilized spaces, like you go to Berlin and you see a kind of 6 meter or 8 meter wide footpath, well paved, very clean, with proper signages, everything is painted as in its place, and 5 people walking on it. Yeah. If you want to import that, and if you want to sanitize your environment, which is what many cities are trying to do through the smart city mission, for instance. They're trying to bring in a physical environment which is alien to our people. So the first job then is to build this connect. And the primary method of building this connect is, we saw the example of the students looking at the lake. The primary method is what we call action research. Yeah? So you involve the community, you involve people in your basic inquiry about the place. And you let people identify the problems. Then you have created the environment for joint action, for collective action. And in that collective action, as I said in my previous project, the collective action was central, the manner in which buildings sit next to each other and they act as a community. Even the so-called inanimate objects have a life. They have jiva in it. Yeah? So that life has to be brought back, the connections have to be. For that, we need to do action research to begin with. So we include the people in identifying the problems, in doing the basic study. Now, before this, is one more thing that we need to do. Sorry if I'm taking too much time. Can I speak a little more, or am I up for time?
No, we are not.
So the basic thing is that in the students whom we are dealing with when we do a study, we need to develop respect for the environment in the student. Respect for the public spaces, respect for the footpath, respect for your environment within the student. Yeah? So the fundamental thing is the transformation of the student's mind into not a technically competent person, but as a compassionate citizen. It is a compassion of the citizenship which will infuse compassion into the people for their own environment. So the basic change has to come, as Gandhi said, if you want to be the change yourself. No. If you want people to be compassionately connected with their physical environment to improve it, be compassionate yourself to begin with and have that connect with the people. Learn to respect the people on the street. Not see them as somebody who is ruining a lovely place which has the potential to become the Berlin street. Look at them as people who live and whose life is at stake in that location. and respect their sentiments and their feelings and their emotions, and then approach the research work through them, not on your own as a technically competent person. So that technical competence comes in the next stage, where we jointly identify the problems. Then as technical experts, as people who are trained to look at Excel sheets and numbers and do quote unquote analysis of things, we are trained to do that. So we bring to bear our training onto the problem identified by the people and find out methods of resolving that problem through people's action. It's only then we can actually build the India that we are looking for. Otherwise, we will be sanitizing our physical environment temporarily, like the smart city missions are doing. We'll sanitize them, we'll make them look like some European street, lovely walkways and tree lines and fountains and pedestrian promenade. There's nothing wrong with them. They're lovely things. I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm saying that becomes our stock set of solutions to improve any place. We have to move away from that and understand that it is the fundamental emotion that people invest in their places which makes them valuable places. So if a space has to become a place, it needs emotional investment from the people who use it. Yeah? Otherwise, what will happen is you can sanitize, you beautify the place, and after 6 months, its matter is back to same. Or after a year or two, slowly, the things will begin to physically deteriorate. The dysfunctional governance will continue, and the place will become disconnected from everyone, from the municipality as well as from the people. So I would say that the fundamental thing that we need to look at is how to connect our people back to their own environment. Our cities have been orphaned by governance or lack of governance. There are people who are drawing salaries to do all the work that we are wanting to do on the street. There are people who draw salaries. We cannot wait to hold them accountable for that till things improve. So there is a groundswell in India, all over India. People are wanting to see a better environment. Their aspirations have gone up, not because they've traveled in the West, because they know that this is not going anywhere. This is only taking us further and further down. It's causing such ill health. Our children have no place to go. They're not secure. Our old people have no place to walk. Our vendors are not secure on the road. So people know this now, and they want to see that changed. And that change will come only if those of us who are so-called technical people hold hands with local population and develop a joint action plan which will be sustainable. If people are connected with the place, they'll continue to ensure that place is not deteriorating. You will not allow the municipality to come and ruin your front yard, isn't it? We'll fight because we have a sense of ownership.
Yep.
We have to build that sense of ownership back. That I would think is the lasting, sustainable solution to the problems of urban India, problems of small towns, big towns, everywhere.
And that's so beautifully put. I think it's a very clear answer, and I think that's born. I think those answers don't come easily. These are answers that come out of many years of experience. We are sort of coming to 4 o'clock, which is when Pankaj had asked me to kind of start winding things down. I had 2 things, or rather one question, and it's a similar question to both of you. It's a question that I have stolen from my favorite podcaster, a gentleman called Amit Verma, who runs a beautiful podcast called The Seen and the Unseen. This is a 2-part question to both of you. Mr. Ji, I'll go with you first. And given the situation that we are in, and given your vast experience, what about the future of India, or what about the future of the environment gives you hope, and what gives you despair? So these are, it's a two-part question. You can answer both, and probably from this, I don't mean this question to be facetious in the sense. I really hope we can take strands of action out of this. Strands of hope and strands of action, both. So, Mishra ji, over to you.
See, hope. Hope comes from the fact that there will always be a tomorrow. And despair comes from the fact that tomorrow may not turn out to be what we want. You see, I see hope in these kids. I see hope in the team that prepared that presentation and presented it so beautifully. I see hope in Mr. Pankaj. I see hope in all the participants who are here today. Because hope emerges out of a very intense sense of wishing to see a change that you want to have. And as KTG has very rightly said, quoted Bapu, his famous quote, "Be the change that you want to see." So, all these kids, all the officials, all the faculty members from IIM who are here, they are all trying to be the change that they want to. And that's why they are here. So this is where from the hope comes. Hope also comes from a stage where things have gone so wrong, things have gone so bad, that now nothing more wrong can happen. It has to become better. And this is something which we are witnessing. And COVID is an excellent example of that dysfunctional world today. That a thing like COVID had to emerge out of almost nowhere. A thing which you can't even see, but which has put such fear in every human being today that they are running scared today as the most powerful man on earth, the president of the US, has been infected. Yes. He says, yes, I am COVID positive. A person who was
denying it
and going around and saying, I will never wear a face mask because I don't believe in it. Now, can you say he doesn't want to believe in it? So you see, this is the level of despair. Hope emerges out of despair, actually.
Right.
The worst kind of despair then presents like a phoenix. Hope emerges from despair. So that is how it has to be. Why the kids of the school chose the Drone Sagar Lake to prepare their project or to focus on. Because they think that the Drone Sagar Lake is in the worst possible state of despair. The lake itself is gasping. It wants to live, but the conditions are such that it is unable to breathe. But these kids are trying to provide that kind of a hope to Drone Sagar Lake. And my request is, please do not let your Dhela River reach that state of despair. I don't know what state it is today, but from the map that I could see, that its floodplain is being encroached. People are entering into it. There is habitation emerging on the other side, or the other bank of it. So things are slowly getting bad for Dhela River. It is the time to stop it. It is the time to say no more and get back. Take ownership, like KT so beautifully said. Kashipur will become one of the finest towns in entire world once Kashipur residents own it. Once they create a hope among themselves that we want to become the best small town in India first in the next assessment. Yes, 1 year time we give to ourselves, and we want to turn Kashipur into the best possible small town in India. Create that kind of hope and you will succeed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mishra ji. Those are really prescient words. I think that there are a lot of hope in that message. Thank you, sir. Katie, sir.
Yeah. I think my primary source of hope is the fact that the young people today are not the kind of young people that we were. You know? We were idealistic, we were dreamers, we were drifters, and we were people who, I was just a floating impurity. I still am, perhaps. But the young people today are far more focused. They are much more informed. Their horizon is wider, and they are impatient for change. This is certainly a sign of hope for India. And 45% of our country are below the age of 25. We are a young nation. We have inherited such incredible wisdom. We have inherited such incredible heritage. We have inherited a society which is founded on mutual compassion. Of course, there is mutual hatred and all that's being fed now. But fundamentally, if you look at the Indian society, it is one which believed in relationship as a fundamental driver for life. And today's young people are not accepting, are not ready to take, to use an unparliamentary word, not ready to take any bullshit. Yeah, they want change and they want it quick. I think that's a great sign of hope. And if any country has a future in the manner, in the chemistry of its being, I think it is India. India has that chemistry. India has very high aptitude for technology. India has young people. India is raring to go. And we have inherited such incredible wealth. We are a very rich nation. And that's our hope. Yeah. And what you have called despair, I would like to paraphrase. For some reason, I don't get desperate. I don't despair.
So that's great. That's great.
I find myself, I would rather call it what is it that you find we need to be alert about? So what I would like to suggest to younger people, young people, not only young people, old people, everyone, all of us are the same. Yeah? But what I'd like to see is that we are able to be alert about the kind of changes which are happening, and we need to be very clear about the action areas that we want to chart out. And if no one else, India's youth has that potential. The young people who just looked at the lake today, in my school days, we would have never gone out and studied a lake.
Right.
They have covered enormous ground. Our horizons have really widened. And if these kids can keep those horizons wide and be alert about the way they have been alert, the kind of issues that they brought out, that kind of alertness, if they can sustain that alertness, that is certainly no room for despair. So I don't think there is any despair. Yeah? We need to have we need to be mindful about the changes which are taking place in our environment, in our governance, in ourselves, in our society at large, and we have to chalk out our action areas through a position of compassion, not through a position of hatred or despair.
Right.
We need to build it up through compassion. And I think our young people have that potential. And I'm so glad to see that such a wonderful study has been done by the students.
Thank you so much to both of you. I think we've had a fantastic hour and 15 minutes of discussion. And I think a lot of us have been jotting down notes. I think a lot of us would have been doing the same thing. And I'm sure more than any of us, I think the younger, the children here have been able to take something out of this. Pankaj, do we open this out to audience questions, or are we running too short of time for the next people?
Be short on time. Be short.
Okay.
And because parallel meeting coming up right after this with Mr. Kumar. Yeah.
So thank you, Mishra ji, and thank you, Katie sir. I think
we have at least one question, two questions from the students, please.
Questions from the students. Yeah.
I think it's very important that they speak.
Yeah. Once.
There are two questions in the chat box. I don't know what they are. If you can go to them, or if anybody would like to ask, we would love to hear their voice. It would be fantastic.
yeah, no, they're all mostly comments, not really questions from the chat box. Yeah.
So, all right, it's up to you. You are the organizer. You take a call. Okay. I would love to hear.
I know. It would be lovely to hear children asking. That's true.
The Q&A has two things in it.
So Saurabh Popley, he's a part of Setu and practicing, a landscape architect and teaching at SPA Bhopal. So Saurabh has got a question. Can we invite you to kindly work with the school children on the rivulets? So I'm not sure whom Saurabh has meant this for. Is it for Mishra ji? I'm not sure.
Yes, of course.
No, for both of them, both of you. So this was on the rivulets. Okay. Saurabh, can you be a little more clearer on this? So, I think he's talking about the region around Pankaj. Probably you could sort of he's saying as a design charrette. So we invite you to kindly work with the school children on the rivulets as a design charrette. Okay. So
actually, getting down to the children right now, because of the overwhelming response of everybody, what's happened is we've kind of shifted all the children onto the Facebook page, and they are going Facebook Live. That's the reason why we're not getting any questions over here. So we're getting collections from the questions over there, and post the venue, the Zoom meeting, we will share the questions. And unfortunately, because it just became so big, we weren't expecting such a large number of people joining in on Zoom this time. So, but I guess we underplayed it. So, yeah, please go ahead.
So yeah, I think the question was, could you lead us on a design charrette on the rivulets? So if maybe we could take that offline. Anyway, Saurabh is a part of our group, and we can look at a little more detail in terms of what he's thinking about in this, and yeah. So
I think we'll have to kind of wind up shortly.
Okay.
Because thank you. I mean, I'd like to thank everybody. Professor. Yeah, I know she's getting a little hassled.
Yeah. Thank you for all your valuable and thought-provoking speech and ideas. It was really indeed a proud privilege to be in the company of such great scholars. Looking forward to your esteemed company in the future endeavors also. Again at 5:30 p.m. we shall meet again for a webinar where Mr. Raman Kumar, a nature science initiative, is going to enlighten us all on Sar Par Pair. And I would also like to share the schedule of events to be followed. Tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. by Mr. Piyush, he is going to present Birds in My Backyard. This is to be followed by an inter-school activity. On October 5th at 5 p.m., students are going to share their personal experiences on Birds on My Backyard. Important key point to be kept in mind is first, toolkits to strengthen data collection, and second, presentation tools and reference. And it comprises of Ms. Aruna, Ms. Sonal, and Mr. Nipul. Thereafter, on 8th of this month, we have a webinar at 5 p.m. This presentation is by Ms. Maitri Mukherjee. On October 10th, the second part of Birds in My Backyard shall be conducted by Mr. Piyush at 3:30 p.m. On October 12th, Ms. Aruna, Ms. Sonal, Ms. Maitri, and Mr. Nipun would interact with students and guide them towards completion of their activity. And October 16th and 17th at 3:30 p.m., we shall declare the winners as well as facilitate some of our guests and invitees. Please adhere to the timing as stated above on the respective dates. Now, I would also like to introduce you all to our key resource persons. Mr. Farhad Contractor is an eminent environmentalist and philanthropist with an experience of over 30 years in revival and rejuvenation of ecological systems. His diverse portfolio covers conserving and reviving forests, strengthening communities, and contributing through ecological master planning. Mr. Saurabh Popli is a leading landscape designer. He teaches architecture and landscape design. He cherishes the goodness, simplicity that characterize India's civilizational genius and traditional way of life. Mr. Amit Chawla is also a contemporary architect and town planner with over 22 years of experience. He has extensive experience in design of large-scale and complex industrial, healthcare, educational, institutional, and residential projects. So with this, we come to the end of the first session, and I hope to see you all again at 5:30 p.m. Thank you.